Hi, everybody. It's the show with Ron. I'm Ron, and we're here to talk about the news headlines and give some context, give some commentary, understand what's really going on. So much is thrown at us in the news media that it's important to make sure we understand where we're being led. So I'll just leave it at that. So, right now we're coming up to the convention. This week is going to be the Democratic National Convention. We have the bigwigs here. We have Obama and we have the president and vice president here. So, if you looked at some of my previous videos, we had a situation over the summer where suddenly Trump seemed to be elevated with success in his attempts to be a candidate, and suddenly it all went away when Biden was forced to drop out. At first, it was thought the weakness of Biden and his desire to stay in that position as candidate. What a wonderful thing it was for the Trump side, and it would have even be better if they bring in that Vice President Harris, who in the past, even the liberal media went after in the first 2.5 years of the administration. Relentless articles, I think in Washington Post and New York Times, about how she's too intemperate and all of her staff members keep quitting, and we've seen the videos on YouTube, the famous word salad videos where she's kind of talking extemporaneously and giggling at inappropriate times. So I think even people on the left were kind of set up with trepidation about her as a candidate. However, she's cleaned up her act in terms of speaking, and she sounds good and clear and concise. And at the same time, Trump has reverted to his sort of disorganized way of speaking, and his candidate has been floundering with poll numbers. Now, they're edging in Harris's favor. However, we remember in 2016 a situation that proves we really cannot trust the polling. A lot of these organizations, they must be too biased on one hand, and on the other hand, in 2016, the media perhaps demonized Trump and his supporters so much that when people were asked to say who they voted for, they might have just sort of not been as honest in their responses, because of course we know it was a surprise defeat for Hillary Clinton, where up to days before the election in 2016, all the news media was saying, oh, it's an 85-95% chance that Hillary's going to win, as she lost. So the idea is you shouldn't count Trump out. Part of this, I used to do research on polling, and there's this syndrome where people are not being truthful in what they say, especially. And the example was in Nicaragua during one of the dictatorial regimes, and the color of the party in power, the one party state, I think it was red, something like that. So they found out that when a pollster asked people in person who they're going to vote for in the next election, and they were holding a red pencil, those polls were a lot different, all things otherwise considered, when they were holding a neutral pencil or a pencil with the color of the other party who was in the race. So this is just an example of how perhaps when we have this political polarization, or we have one side that captures the media, that captures the zeitgeist of the time, that maybe people that can throw polling off. Now, I've also been, if you've viewed this channel for the last almost a year now, when I started out on this back in October, I've been bringing up this concept that I had years ago when I advised politicians, and the idea was liberty. And this was an idea that you can cut out the polarization. And I've given this example many times, but here I'll give it again. You say Americans like liberty. They like the liberty to decide for themselves if they want to have an abortion just between themselves and the doctor without the government interfering. In the same way, they like the liberty to keep and bear arms and shoot off guns sometimes. See, that you can bring people together with this sort of concept and get away from these groups that are polling on ideology, that give a rating to a senator or congressman based on the doctrinaire way they vote. Got to get away from that, and liberty is one way to do it. And what has Harris been saying in the last week or so? She's brought my idea of liberty. That's tremendous. That's an interesting thing. I almost have a big enough ego to think somebody has seen it in my channel, but so few people watch my videos. I can't bring myself to say that somebody's been taking my advice. But I at the time when I was saying it, I never thought that the left would glom onto this idea of liberty to break the polarization. I thought maybe it might be something Trump would want to do if the Republicans would move away from the divisive anti-abortion issue that seems to have hurt them in a lot of smaller races. But Harris has done that. And then the other thing that the Harris campaign has done, and I had been advising this, well, for the past month at least, and well, I guess before, because it happened in the debate. You know, it does no good for the president administration to be telling people that things are better than ever, that America's standing in the world is better than ever, that the economy is better than ever. People know it's not. And specifically, I brought up many, many times, and this probably goes even months ago, I brought up that specific, even though you might be able, I'm too hot in here. Even though you can bring up some macroeconomic indicators that say that unemployment is down, overall consumer price index is in a good place. People do know that their groceries have tripled, quadrupled in price. And for fast food, it's even more. So for normal blokes out there in the world, you can't just have Biden up there from his lofty perch saying that things are better than ever. You've got to address the issues of inflation. And we see one of the Harris initiatives is to address specifically, just what I said, grocery inflation, the things that are impacting that sector of people who are the massive voters. And if you're just some lofty economist somewhere with plenty of money, you might not notice it that much, but the massive voters, the common people do. So Harris has come out of the gate very strong so far and has gotten a lot of momentum. At the same time, Trump has sort of fallen down and become undisciplined again, as he has in the past. And I had noted that it seemed to be after the assassination attempt and during the convention, he was rather disciplined in the way he spoke, and other people were on message with some of the things he wanted to do, but that has not carried on through the month of August. And I also wanted to bring up, it will be a test in the convention to see if Harris can maintain her public image and get it away from the word salad stuff, the some of the criticisms of the past. She's done it so far. This will be the litmus test this week, coming week, in the Democratic convention, where she can cement that. And part of all this feels to me a little bit like, I don't know what it's called. I used to call it the Reagan syndrome. You know, when Reagan was running for president in the late 70s, the media, by and large, and politicians said, he's a nut. He wants to put in a few more nuke missiles than we do, and he's a crazy guy, and he's going to get us into a war with the Soviet Union. He thinks that the totalitarian state is evil, and although, well, it may be, we can't say that because all we want is peace. And he's a nut. He's intemperate. He's crazy. Then they had the debates with Jimmy Carter, and people got to hear Reagan directly, maybe a lot of them for the first time, and he seemed quite reasonable. So I think maybe the same situation has happened with Harris, that, in the last couple of years, the media has calmed down the anti-Harris talk, the kind of media that supports the Democrats, some of the biggest media outlets in the United States. They've calmed that down. However, people still, I think, had the residual feeling. They've seen YouTube videos online of her speaking, and so they had this viewpoint of her in a certain way. And she and her campaign have certainly turned that around in the last month, and she sounds coherent and reasonable and has specific plans that target the things that I'd been advising, talking to both candidates in general about, cutting through the political polarization with the concept of liberty, and specifically addressing the economic concerns, the inflationary concerns that people have, instead of trying to just say, like Biden had, that things have never been better. So this is an exciting turnabout for the Democrats. I guess it means it could turn back. It could turn back at any time. So, like I say, you don't want to underestimate Trump. And what we will, if you're not in the United States, what to expect from this convention? Certainly the media will portray it as the most wonderful thing ever. They, by and large, support the Democrats. They have almost quite openly. So you can expect glowing reviews. That's one thing we already know no matter what happens. So it's more important than ever for us to look at this. And I'll try to do some shows, so maybe look at some aspects of the convention and see if it's really as fantastic as the media, I'm sure, has already queued up their articles to say it is and to tell people it is. I had something else to say about this. I forget. Yeah, I suppose, in the past we've talked about how times of political polarization, there's certain characteristics. And if you look back at some of my recent videos in the past few months, especially this year, I've done ones comparing the situation today to 1968. It's not exactly the same. It's not quite as bad, but you have situations of big protests against U.S. policy, protests against wars overseas, assassination attempts, probably created by political polarization, maybe media activism. And the last thing is a chaotic Democratic Party National Convention. So I'm sure the number one priority on the Democrats' mind is to make sure these protesters, these anti-Israeli protesters, who would certainly try something during the convention, will not change the narrative of the convention from, a stunning success and Trump's finished, which is what the media wants to say, to change it to like, it's chaos in another Democratic National Convention. So security measures along at the convention, neighborhoods nowhere near convention. They're going to lock down everywhere around that convention. What else do we have here? Trump rambling. Here we have, he's giving the media stupid quotes to promote. He said, I'm at like 93% at the polls. Why are we having an election? Sometimes when the media, he knows as well as anyone, the media is going to pick these things out and promote them. And so you got to be careful of that. I think he and his supporters would be the first one to say that. They got to get Trump disciplined. Recession. J.D. Vance said his wife was voting for Hillary, a woman voting for Hillary. That did key in for a lot of people, the idea of a woman breaking the glass ceiling. But as I've talked about before, another good thing about the Harris campaign, she is not following the gender or sex-based campaign of Hillary Clinton that emphasized woman, 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 and congratulating all Americans for, in advance for electing Hillary Clinton and breaking the glass ceiling, this sort of thing. She shied away from that. In the same way, I think that, President Obama has shied away from being seen as a black president. I don't believe he ever campaigned as that. That was never emphasized. So this emphasis on the Harris side is very wise. Okay, I had to readjust my windows there. Here we have some criticism of Elon Musk from The Guardian. Oh my, Guardian's a very left-leaning British publication. But certainly Elon Musk has let slip some false tweets, some things foolishly tweeted. I think on the other side, if we're going to be fair, we have to say that many people, including myself, prefer the unregulated exchange of ideas that we had more in the earlier days of the web, say 20 years ago. And sometimes that includes crazy stuff, conspiracy theories, even hate speech. But I think it's better to let those things flow out in the open instead of censoring them. And certainly, I've read a lot about from the left about how terrible the unleashing of Twitter is. But I think maybe it's okay to have one large major social media presence that allows freer speech and less censorship than you would get on, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, those sorts of things. It's hard to have a really strict line, but I think in general, you need to trend towards freer speech, even if it allows things that aren't true or you don't agree with. Report CEOs make 268 times what typical workers make. I wonder what most people feel about this thing, most common Joes. The CEO, in a way, is not equal to the average employee, the typical worker. For one thing, they have shorter hours and longer vacations. However, they are tasked with the direction of the company. They're not just doing CEO things. They are put in place usually by the board of directors to do certain things to the share prices, the stock prices. They have certain specific goals, so they are the captain of the ship. And it's, in the same way that basketball players or football players get millions of dollars because they're taking a cut, their fair cut of what they're producing. I think in many cases CEOs have it's the same situation with CEOs. Here we have situation in Israel. This is the Jerusalem Post, obviously a pro-Israeli source. It was kind of interesting. It brings up another interesting syndrome that we have where there was a Hamas official was asked on CNN about do they now, after this horrible, almost genocidal destruction that Israel has visited on Gaza, do they regret the attacks, the hostage takings, the killings? And that didn't go down very well. This is the idea that, for instance, with the United States, with George W. Bush, the kind of blundering wars we had in Afghanistan and Iraq in the early part of this century, the first years of this century. From a U.S. perspective, it's sort of like, oh, why are we spending all of our money on this and wasting our international credibility, and possibly, most likely, certainly killing lots of innocent people. On the other hand, one would hope that it is also sort of a lesson to other little countries that, for instance, the Taliban that hosted the terrorists who came and attacked America. And the result of that was the awakening the sleeping giant, the blundering giant of the United States that can spend trillions of dollars to wipe your government off the map. So they would just say, hey, we had our own little thing here. We didn't allow music. Women couldn't go to school. It was paradise. So by hosting Al-Qaeda, we ruined all that, and they threw us out of power. The same thing with Saddam Hussein, where the issue of going into Kuwait, and I know eventually all this is boomeranged on him, and they killed his kids and killed him. Certainly, at the very least, there's a lot of horror and blood and injustice that goes along with all these things, but at the very least, you would hope the littler countries might think twice about some of their actions that might awake the sleeping giant. Now, having said all that, we know what happened in Afghanistan. This is one thing I think I can credit justifiably the Trump administration for. They had a situation in Afghanistan where they basically pulled almost everybody out. They left a few little troops there that guaranteed that very nascent, early democratic regime in power. Women could go to school. How about that? And then for some reason, Biden wanted to take credit for that, so they pulled everybody out precipitously, basically gave the country back to the Taliban. So all of that effort was for nothing, and the women are back out of school with that hardline government. Killed a lot of Marines in the meantime as well. That was a big blunder. That was a big mistake. I've often wondered how, Obama and Michelle Obama, who put such big stock on foreign women like the ones that were kidnapped in Nigeria, once the events unfolded in Afghanistan and that country went deeply back under the veil again, I wonder how the Obamas felt about Biden's actions. It's a hard thing. You're in a hard position when you're the guy who's really making the decisions, and they took a chance, the Biden administration, to grab that glory and say, we were the ones who pulled us out of Afghanistan, and didn't go as expected. Just like George W. Bush, his big wars in the Middle East, they didn't go as expected either. Just like President Obama's war when they overthrew Gaddafi in Libya. That was one of the worst ones ever. Didn't go as expected. It's still a nightmare in that part of the country, but Libya is not as strategically significant, so you don't hear about it as much. Plus, I'm pretty sure the media just is not willing to vilify a Democrat like Obama in the way they were willing to do with George W. Bush. So It's a real tricky thing to get engaged in these foreign wars. I wouldn't want to have to make those decisions. What else do we have here? I didn't see this before. End is nigh for snooze fest late night talk shows. They really are terrible and bland. I grew up watching Johnny Carson and Letterman, and then a little later Conan. He was okay, but all of these, they have lost their way. They're. I'm not sure. I hate to be one of those people that say you keep politics out of it, because you can make political jokes. Carson made some political jokes, but I think that they've just gone for the easy pickings. You know, Stephen Colbert, he's funny, but he had to bring back his political guy stick to make his version of late night talk show work. And now, gee whiz, there's hardly any reason to watch these shows. Gosh, what they should do, and I guess what they do, what's that? There's some channel. It's an Antenna TV. It's a free-to-air television, digital television station. They just show old versions of The Tonight Show from the 70s, 10 times better than anything today. And they hold up. It doesn't matter if, you know, those stars are plugging movies that are going to come out in 1976. They're tremendous, some tremendous shows. They should do that with Letterman, too, his original NBC show. I just don't understand. I don't know. I was intrigued by this. Sometimes the things just intrigue me. People who rent everything, even their clothes. What? Why? As I'm getting closer to the end of my life than to the beginning, I do look at all the junk I've compiled and collected in several countries. And I just it gets harder and harder to just say, do I throw this away? Do I sell it? How could I liquidate it if something really went wrong? Or when I got to go into a nursing home or worse? So it is intriguing, people who live light like this. However, on the other hand, probably when you're young, you probably want to be building up your assets, especially your real estate, as opposed to this very perhaps peripatetic existence. Have you heard about these guys? This guy and this gal stuck in space until 2025. They're up in the space station. And something about the rockets don't work, so they can't set up another mission to bring them down until next year. I think that's maybe cool. If you only get once, maybe one time in your life, maybe twice, to be an astronaut in space, might as well make it a good long stay. I don't know why. Again, this is another intriguing one. This is in Great Britain. This sounds like the nonsense that you'd have in the United States, but no. Great Britain is catching up. Anxiety dogs must be allowed in the classrooms, parents say. It's Scotland, of all places. I can foresee a time in the future where they're like 30 people in class, students, and they all claim anxiety, and each one of them has a dog by their side. That would kind of be fun. And this is neither here nor there, but this guy wants to scan everybody's eyes in the world and then give you his Bitcoin thing. Better stay away from these scammy things. Men waiting until 50s to become fathers. This is a Drudge report. Sometimes people say, "Why do you follow this?" And it is a testament to how interesting the headlines are, and I know there are news media around the world that simply look at this list that the Drudge Report compiles every day and throughout the day for interesting, clickbaity, intriguing stuff that they can pull off the wire and fill in. So, anyway, Harris is following all my recommendations on liberty and addressing inflation for groceries. Remember that. Stay tuned. Who knows what other advice their campaign might take? So stay tuned. We're going to have more videos. We'll see this in context. I already explained the U.S. news media is going to say the convention is a triumph because they support the Democrats. That's already set. And whether you support the Democrats or Republicans, that's true. That just means that a channel like this, where we look at the context and what's really going on, is more important than ever. So come back again, like and subscribe. It's hard for me to promote this channel. They say it's election advertising if you mention, I got this direct from YouTube, if you mention Trump or Biden, one of the candidates, in your video, even if it's commentary, it's considered election advertising. So I'd love for more people to view the site. I think I have some interesting insights, some unique insights you can't get anywhere else. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.